Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. We're taking a look today at the brand new iPhone SE. This is an affordable phone from Apple. It's kind of along the lines of what they've been doing with the iPad recently. It's a really nicely performing device that won't break the bank, and you can get it unlocked at a pretty reasonable price. We're going to be taking a look at this phone and what it has versus the more expensive phones in Apple's lineup here in just a second. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor is anyone reviewing or approving what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this device is all about. Now, the price point on this one is $399. That's the unlocked version. You might find it for less with carriers if you agree to contract lengths and that sort of thing. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. It looks and feels a lot like the iPhone 6s. In fact, it's got the same basic design. You've got the large bezels, top and bottom. The screen size at 4.7 inches is exactly the same size as the iPhone 6 and 6s. In fact, it is exactly the same on the side here. There are some differences, though. The first is that it now has a glass back. And the reason why it has a glass back is that it works with wireless chargers. You can put it down on one of those charging pads and it will begin charging. The problem, of course, is that's another thing that can break, because now you've got glass on the screen on the front and glass on the back. So you're probably going to want to get a case for this one. Speaking of cases, I don't know if the iPhone 6s cases will all fit on this one, because the camera is in a slightly different spot and it's a little bit larger. So you might have to buy a new case for this one, but otherwise it feels a lot like the old phone. And if you like this form factor, this is pretty much exactly the same thing. And the hardware specifications on this one were surprising to me in a good way. You've got 64 gigabytes of storage. Typically, these entry-level Apple devices start with 32. So you've got some room for photos and apps and whatnot. That was good to see. The processor on board is the same chip that is in the much more expensive iPhone Pro 11, which I have here. And you'll see in a few minutes the performance isn't the same, but it's still well beyond other phones at this price point. So I was really impressed that Apple would actually bump the specs up here on their entry-level phone to the point that they have. And you'll see some pretty impressive benchmarks on this as we work our way through the review. As I mentioned, you've got the 4.7-inch display. This is an LED backlit LCD display. They have the True Tone on it. It looks pretty close to what I remember the iPhone 8 display looking like, and it's in the same size as the prior iPhone 6s. So if you're very used to what your 6 or 6s looks like, this display will look a little bit better, but pretty much the same. The resolution is 1334 by 750, and it gives you about 625 nits of brightness. I did turn the brightness down slightly because it was blowing out my camera, but it is nice and bright, and you shouldn't have any trouble seeing it out in the daylight and also in darker environments. Now, the weight on this one is 5.22 ounces or 148 grams. Very lightweight. It's lighter than the iPhone 11 Pro. It's a little slippery, though, because of that glass back. So again, I think the case might be a good idea here. It has a fingerprint sensor and does not have the Face ID. And it works just like other iPhone versions work. You just put your thumb or whatever finger you've programmed to it on there, push it down, and it will unlock the phone for you. Very fast to unlock. You can have multiple fingerprints programmed into it. The button is not a physical button. It's just a capacitive sensor area, and it will detect pressure when you push down, and you'll feel a little bit of a haptic feedback vibration kick in when you do that. It actually feels like you're pushing a button. Apple's done some pretty cool stuff with their non-movable parts to make them feel like they're moving. There is no headphone jack on this phone, unlike the iPhone 6. You do get a pair of earbuds in the box that do have a lightning adapter on the back. It is a lightning connector here and not USB Type-C. You also, of course, get a charging cable. It supports fast charging, although the charger it comes with is not a fast charger. But if you were to get that faster charger, you can take advantage of those faster charge times. And of course, you can use the wireless charging too if you prefer. Now, the speakers on the phone aren't bad. You've got your speaker here at the bottom, but it also uses the handset speaker as another one. So you've got stereo sound on this when you don't have headphones attached, left and right. And it's good and loud. It's not going to be the best audio quality. You'll want to connect headphones for that. But really, for speakerphone conversations and even just listening to some podcasts or something, this is going to work out pretty well. So I was very surprised, again, with the quality that we're seeing here on what is really a budget phone by Apple standards. Your volume rocker is over here. You've got your silent switch where it usually is right there. Your power switch is here, and then you've got your SIM card tray right there. This will support multiple carriers because in addition to the physical nano SIM you can slide into this, it also has an eSIM built in, so you could run it on 2 carriers if you wanted to do something like that. Now, battery life on the phone, Apple says, is about what you would expect out of an iPhone 8. I would agree with that assessment. For most people, that should get you through the workday. But if you've got the display brightness turned up and you're playing a lot of games, or if you are in an area where you don't have great cell phone coverage, you will see a reduction in overall battery life compared to someone who's not gaming all day and is keeping their display brightness at reasonable levels. So everyone's mileage varies on battery life, but this one feels good to me. Not as good as my iPhone 11 Pro, but it's also a lot less expensive versus the iPhone 11 Pro. And I have to say that having one of those charging pads on my desk has really been a big help in keeping my battery topped off throughout the day. And that's something you might want to get because you don't have to plug anything in. You just put it down and it will charge itself up. Now, the camera system on the phone really surprised me. It's a 12 megapixel single camera. This is what Apple calls a wide-angle lens, not to be confused with the super wide-angle lens that's on their higher-end phones. It looks great. It's got a 1.8 aperture. I took a bunch of pictures with it just on its normal shooting mode, and it even has some decent natural bokeh to it as well, as you can see here. Lots of great detail. Looks pretty much the same as the wide-angle lens on my 11 Pro looks like, to me at least. Now, it does support portrait mode, but there's a catch on this phone because it only has a single camera. It will not take portrait mode photos if it can't find a person. So it does do a really nice job of blurring out the background when you have a person in frame. But if we were to bring on an object here and try to photograph that object, let me go over to the camera real quick. When you put it into portrait mode, it will tell you that no person is detected up here, and it won't give you a portrait photograph. So it really relies on some AI to figure out where the person ends and the background begins. The other Apple phones that have more than one camera are able to create a depth map based on the images coming out of 2 different lenses. This one doesn't have that, and it has to do it all digitally. So it does a nice job in portrait mode, but only with people. I did try to take some pictures of my dog, and although they came out nice, they were not portrait photographs. So just be aware of that. That's one limitation with this lower cost phone. Low light photography does very well on here. The photos aren't very noisy. It looks very similar to what I get out of my 11 Pro. But the SE here does not have the night mode where it can do one of those long exposures. So if you want that, that's not here. You got to go to the more expensive phone. But for low light, it's doing pretty good. And the video modes on this really surprised me. It'll shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, which is great in an entry-level phone. The video looks great. It has an optical stabilizer on the rear camera, so things are really nice and smooth when combined with Apple's smoothing as well. It will not do HDR in video like the higher-end phones will do, but other than that, it seems to have most of the video functionality you might find on a more expensive iPhone, including that cool 240 frames per second slow-mo mode at 1080p. All in on the rear camera, very impressive, especially when it comes to video. A little bit of a limitation on the portrait mode, but beyond that, an excellent camera with great visual quality. And I think a lot of people will have a hard time telling the difference between this camera and what you might find on the more expensive 11 Pro. Now, the front camera here is not as good as the rear camera. It is 7 megapixels only. It will only do 1080p video at 30 frames per second, and it does not have an optical stabilizer. But it still looks pretty good. It does have a portrait mode that also requires a person to be photographed in order for it to work. So it's not going to be as good as what you'll get on a more expensive iPhone, but it's still good enough, I think, for the price point. But the rear camera here is definitely the one to talk about on this new iPhone model. Let's take a look now and see how the phone performs. We'll look at some games, some browsing, and some benchmarks. Let's have a look. Now, as I mentioned, this phone has the same processor as the much more expensive iPhone 11 Pro. It's the A13 Bionic, and as a result, as you're browsing around to different applications or going on the web or whatever, things are going to be super snappy and responsive. You'll notice this, especially if you've been using the same phone for the last 5 or 6 years. It's going to be a huge upgrade, even if the phone feels the same in your hand and the screen is the same size. It's a really nicely performing device for the price point, and it was very impressive to see Apple do that. Videos work great here as well, so if you're into Netflix and YouTube and that sort of thing, it's all going to be very snappy and responsive. They'll look great on the display, and I think it's just a wonderfully performing phone for its budget price. Games will work fine on here too. I haven't played too many on it just yet, but I was messing around with some of the more demanding titles like this one, which is the Angry Birds AR edition, the Isle of Pigs. What this does is it kind of projects out the Angry Birds universe on your desk here, and you can zoom in and kind of interact with this thing in your actual environment. We can do a quick level here so you can get a feel for how this looks. I can zoom in a little bit closer here and play the game here with really no lag or slowdowns or anything else like that, even though we've got this AR thing going on. Really cool stuff, and I think any game that you can find on the App Store is going to run just fine on here without too many problems at all. And on the 3D Mark Slingshot Benchmark test, we got a score of 7,815. That is below the score we got out of the iPhone 11 Pro that is running with the same processor. And that tells me that Apple is clocking the chip a little slower on the SE, probably for power requirements, and also maybe because they don't want their entry-level phone outperforming or matching the performance of their $1,200 flagship. Nonetheless, you are getting great performance, just not as good as what you'll see out of the higher-end phones. But when you look at other phones that come in at around the price point of the iPhone SE, the SE here is light years ahead. Look at the Google Pixel 3a. It doesn't even get close to this one. In fact, the Pixel 3a is performing about where the iPhone 6s was a number of years ago. So Apple is really ratcheting up performance here at the entry point, and it looks like they're very serious about what they're doing with this SE. It wasn't an afterthought. They really wanted to provide some real performance at this segment of the market. And I think if you're one of the people that's just been on the fence about upgrading your phone, this might be a good one to upgrade to, and I think you'll get a lot of years of use out of it, just given how well it's performing right now in 2020. So altogether, a great value from Apple. Hopefully we see more of this kind of stuff from them as the months progress here, and I can't find anything really to complain about on this budget price phone, budget priced at least by Apple standards. That's going to do it for now. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Rick Vestudo, Chris Allegretta, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.